Hi, friends. I am 72 years old. My name is Steve Fry. I'm from Platte, South Dakota, and I am now trying something that I've never done before. I am totally computer illiterate, but I am going to be YouTubing for the next few weeks about some life experiences. And many of you are going to shake your head and say, oh, that can't happen to one guy, but it did. But before we start, I want to give you just who I am, my business card right there. The day his heart stopped crying, from Platte, South Dakota. My phone number's on there, how to contact me. This is a book that they wrote about my life that was advertised over TV, The Day His Heart Stopped Crying. And the book, the cover was designed by a young lady who was into drugs. Her name is Emily. And she was scheduled to get treatment on a Saturday. And she had designed this cover for me, even though she was on drugs. She designed this cover for me. And on Wednesday, she overdosed on fentanyl. But I present this here to you to show it to you. I was blessed and honored by the author here, who was news anchor at Kettleland in Sioux Falls, to write the story of my life. The story of my life, to start with, you'll think, boy, the man doesn't love his dad. Oh, my dad was the greatest man in my eyes that ever walked. I respected him and I loved him deeply. But the first few years of my life, I couldn't understand him because he was successful at everything he done. From touching people's lives to helping them, to athletics. And he wanted me to be that type of a person, and I couldn't grasp it. My father's name was Harley Fry, Pastor Harley Fry. And I was born in a small town in West Union, Iowa. And I lived there the first approximately 8 years of my life. Although at one time we went up to seminary where my dad took his ministerial training in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and we lived in a dormitory with him and my mom and my sisters. And then we moved to a small town called Westby, Wisconsin, right over by La Crosse. And like I say, my dad was just good at everything. And he tried to be the best father he could. But I rebelled. In fact, when he was there, he built the log church that still stands there today, and they still have services there. My father built that church. But when I was there, that's where my life started going downhill. And I went into deep depression. And that's what this talking is about, what the book is about. It's going to teach you that if you have depression, any sins that you have, hatred, anger, unforgiveness, alcoholism, bitterness, I know how you can overcome that through Jesus Christ. And that's what this is all about. See, I've been sober now for 40 years, but this tells the story of how I became a homeless drunk at one time, living on the streets in Des Moines and Kansas City. But back to my story here, so you want to follow me all the way through as I backtrack sometimes. Westby, Wisconsin, the first church my dad served, and that's where I started growing up. remember my dad telling me to go get a haircut one day. As soon as you're done with school, go get a haircut. Well, when I got out of school that day, I forgot, and I went and played with the kids and happy-go-lucky on my way home. But when I got home, my dad says, Steve, you didn't get your haircut. And right away, I was scared. I said, Dad, he wasn't there today. He says, okay, tomorrow you go. I lied to my dad. I've never forgot that. 60 years later, I still remember how I lied to my dad. One day I was driving down the street on my bicycle. And up on the porch, off to the left-hand side of the road, was this handicapped girl sitting on the porch. My dad said, Steve, every time you see somebody handicapped, mentally or physically, you treat them with respect and love. I was taught that. And so as she hollered at me, Steve, look at this. I looked up at her. I waved. When I did, my bicycle, like a lot of the old bicycles, I was heading towards the curb at full speed, and I yanked the handlebars, but the wheel didn't turn. And I hit the curb head on, flew over the handlebars, landed on my head, managed to get up, picked up my bicycle, walked a block and a half home. And as I walked, I felt myself getting wet down there, and I thought, oh, I peed my pants. Got home, went inside. My dad was on the first floor there, the house, an old farmhouse. And I went upstairs, and I dropped my pants to go potty, and I was blood from the waist on down. And I screamed and hollered. My dad came running up the steps. Now, folks, this is the honest truth. He came up the steps, and he grabbed a towel, and he whipped it between my legs, and he pulled me up, and he carried me to, it was an old 1948 freezer, I believe. And he laid me in there, and off across the town we went. Carried me into the hospital there. And in the accident, I had severed my testicles. Now, this is honest truth. By the mercies of God and the grace of God, I went in, they done surgery. I laid on my back for 6 months with ice packs on me, trying to get the blood circulating again. Jesus healed me, and I fathered 4 children later in life. Unbelievable. But like I said, for 6 months, I'm laying there with ice packs on. In the fall, when I go back to school, my dad went to the teacher. She says, hey, be careful of Steve. He's had a bad accident. And so I go back. I'm embarrassed, walking bow-legged. And that's where my depression started setting in. And I was always getting in accidents. Another time, I'm going down a hill again. I come down, there's another L-shaped turn at the end. Of course, then them old bicycles, your brakes didn't work half the time. I hit that curb again, head on. Flew over the handlebars. I picked myself up, and this time I didn't break anything, luckily. And my tire was bent in the shape of an L. Couldn't use it. Carried it home. My dad's out there pounding it back together. And that's the way it went in Westby, Wisconsin. Some of the first traumatic experiences that I've had. Well, we moved to a small town called Toronto, South Dakota, town of 110 people. My dad said, Steve, you're going to learn how to make your own way, make money. Not make money, but support yourself. I said, okay. So he built me a trailer. It's about 3 foot by 4 foot with 2 wheels on it, hooked it up with a hitch behind my bicycle. And we were so poor that we had to grow everything. So he loaded up that trailer with squash. And I had to pedal around town pulling this trailer, selling squash for a nickel a piece. Then he come to me and he says, Steve, now I'm going to run an ad in the paper. Now I'm going to buy you a lawnmower. The first one I buy. After that, you have to buy and keep it in working order. So he run me the ad in the paper. And I got a lot of responses. And then he made me take a book and I'd write every lawn I mowed down. I'd get 75 cents a lawn, maybe 50 cents. But you realize this was way back in 1960. So I kept mowing lawns. One day, I love sports, and so one day I had baseball practice. Like I said, my dad was a very loving man, one of the greatest men that ever lived in my eyes. But he was a strict disciplinarian. If he said, do this, you do that, and don't lie. I says, Dad, I got baseball practice today. He says, no, Steve, you go mow lawn first. Well, I thought I'm going to baseball practice. So I went to the baseball diamond. I'm playing center field. And I saw my dad, when I'm out there playing center field, my dad comes down the road in the car. I thought, oh boy, this is not going to be good. And he got out of the car. The game kept going on. My dad walked out onto the field, out in the center field, grabbed me by my shirt collar, took me to the car. He said, Steve, we have church at 7:00 Wednesday night. You better not be 1 minute late, and you better have that lawn mowed beforehand. He gave me a ride home. I took the lawnmower and I literally ran down the street, pushing my lawnmower. Started mowing the lawn, and I kept mowing and mowing, and I kept watching the time. And I saw that it was about 5 minutes to 7 when church started, and I knew I had to be there. I shut the lawnmower off, and I ran down the street across town, slid into church right as it started. After church, I went back in the dark, finished mowing the lawn. That's the way my dad taught me. Be committed. Don't lie. And that's the way my dad brought me up. But one time he said to me, he said, Steve, he says, here's a newspaper. Take this over, give it to Julius Minor, about 2 or 3 blocks down the road. Oh, I don't want to go, Dad. He says, Steve, you take that newspaper over to Julius Minor. You give it to him. I says, okay. So I go walking over there, and the weeds are waist high around his house, shingles falling out, and the windows half broke out. Just a mess. He was a bachelor. So I knocked on the door, and he says, hello, who's there? And I says, Steve, Harley Fry's son. Come in. So I go in, and there's this Julius Minor in a wheelchair with one leg. And I says, Mr. Miner, I'm supposed to bring this to you. It's from my father, Harley Fry. Gave him the newspaper. And in there is a typical bachelor's room. And he had, it was just, I mean, it was newspapers, magazines stacked waist high all over. Filthy, filthy. And in the table was these glass jars about that big around or about that high that your mom used to get grape jelly in. And when you done with the jelly, you always saved them to drink out of. That's your drinking glass. That's all you could afford. Well, he had a bunch of them stacked there. Dirty, filthy, flies in there and everything. And he says, "Do you like grape juice?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So he grabbed 2 glasses. He poured grape juice in there. He says, "Here, have a drink. We'll have a drink together." And I was taught, you always be polite. We drank that juice. He says, "You like music?" And I says, "Yes." Pulled out of his pocket a harmonica. And he started playing this music. Some polka music, just happy music. And it was great. And his right leg would keep beat to the music. It'd just be going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. It was very humorous. But Julius Miner didn't have a dime to his name. He lived just day by day. No friends. So we done that. Had good time that day. When I went home, my dad says, "Steve, from now on, you take him the newspaper every week. You spend time with him." Oh, that's what my dad was trying to teach me. But I couldn't understand. One day, my dad is doing plumbing in the basement of our house. And there was a basketball game uptown. And I said to him, I says, "Dad, can I go to that game? I'd really like to go to that game tonight." He said, "Steve, I need some help doing this plumbing." "Okay, Dad, I'll help you. I'll help you." So I jumped in there and I helped him. We'd done that plumbing. We got done about 6:30 at night. I said, "No, okay, we're done, Dad. Now can I go to the game?" He says, "Steve, I'm going to tell you no. And the reason is because I want to see if you are man enough to help somebody, your father, your mother, or anybody that needs help without asking something in return." What a lesson. My dad was always teaching me, always trying to get me out of the love in his heart to be a man, to be perfect, to reach out. I've never forgot that. Never forgot that. My dad asked me to go in the basement every year. I had to sit down there in the potato bin, maybe 10, 12 foot long, 4 or 5 foot wide, and 4 foot deep, filled with potatoes. I'm talking thousands of potatoes. But that's all we had to eat. And I had to de-sprout the potatoes. I sat down there for several days at a time, just de-sprouting the potatoes. My dad loved me so much, but he was trying to teach me to be willing to give, to reach out. And that's what happened in my life to start with. Then one day, my dad was having a big Thanksgiving dinner in the house. Everybody's sitting around there. It was packed in the kitchen, living room, dining room. And I had to go to the bathroom. So I went in there, dropped my pants. And from the waist down, my whole body was covered with shingles. Big shingles, watery shingles, terrible, painful. And I hollered, and my dad come running in, and they rushed me to the hospital again. After they had that under control, I came home, and my dad went to the teachers and he says, listen, he's having a hard time learning to survive, learning. Having a nervous breakdown. And I'm only in my teens, so I'm talking 13. He said, teachers, be careful of him. Treat him kindly. That's how my life started. Terribly inferior, terribly depressed, not really realizing what my dad was teaching me. Now I'm going to open this up for questions. If you have any questions, you can ask me questions. Next time I come on, which will be next Saturday night, I'm going to tell you what happened when we moved up into North Dakota then. And then I went to a private high school and what happened there. But I want you to realize there is hope. There is an answer if you're going through any problems in your life. I've faced life head on. Scared that I was even going to survive through some things. Tell you about my military. How I was left for dead in the ditch one day. But I'm now open for questions. If you have questions, next Saturday I'll be on live again. And I'll be praying for each one of you. Thank you very much. I ended the stream, okay?